Alright, and we're back with the base tour with Dar 99 and Pyromancer 56, and I'll let them pick up where they left off.
Alright, so we were just talking about assembly lines and all those fancy, complicated recipes. Now we'll move on to some simpler stuff, and then we'll get
I don't
into
know if you want to cover the multi-smelters real quick.
multi-smelters.
Yeah, I noticed them a minute ago. You got them set up the same way XAR has his, at least with the coils.
Yeah, we actually, I had forgot, didn't actually get these coils upgraded fully. They could take the quad alloy too. Once it hits like HSS coil, yeah. That's where it caps out at the 2 stacks per operation, so it'll suck in 2 full stacks of materials. And so if you put in 2 full stacks of dust, you're going to get 2 full stacks of ingots out. After that, we assume that the coil only just helps for power reduction because it doesn't take more than 2 stacks.
I believe the wiki says the quad alloy is like at 800% efficiency or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it almost makes these things take just about 0 power to do what they're doing. One is IV powered, one is EV powered. It's just happened to be where the power line was. They're set up a little differently, but both are rigged to the A system to, if we need some stuff smelted, dusted, and then gets it'll.
And those multi-smelters are very underused by most people, as I can tell, but they're very nice.
Yes.
Yes, they are very nice, and we actually had not used them until recently. Like the first time I played the pack, never made it. The second time with Econ's other server, we made it there, and we're like, why have we never used this before? And I made it right away this time around here with this server. I made it as soon as we could. It was HV. Didn't even bother making like a HV, just single block furnace. Just made that instead. Because I was like, there's no sense in making a single block when you can have that thing do so much faster. Even running that sucker at like MV, it's still way faster than even a HV or EV single smelter. Yeah. It's just, it's really nice. Yeah, definitely worth having for sure. Well, here's some stuff. I mean, these, you got 10 IV circuit assembly machines. They're all broken down to do like an individual step of the new circuits. So let's say like 2 of them will make the first part of a circuit, the next one will make the next thing up that uses those parts, and then so forth up to the main frames, which use all the previous parts. It's to help make all the stuff faster, because if you only have one machine, it's got to make the little parts for the next part, and it just backs up. And with AE crafting, these things can get a little messy with that, because it'll start trying to put the different parts in each one, being they have multiple inputs, and the recipe could get clogged up, and it'll just have different parts there, and it won't run anything. So helps to break them apart, have different things going on with each one. Yeah, these are all IV. Then we got a couple IV machines here, some scanners. Again, here's another reactor setup. The quad reactor is feeding this buffer here. And then this buffer is feeding all these machines. And then over here we got an actual LUV buffer. And then what that's feeding is an LUV circuit assembler and then a ZPM circuit assembler. The Advanced Circuit Assembly Machine 6 is a ZPN one. And another thing that's going on that's kind of behind the scenes, behind these walls with the setup of them, is we're using a transceiver to output the soldering alloy. So if you look over here, this fluid extractor right here is filling up constantly with soldering alloy ingots. Okay, and then it's outputting soldering alloy. That's going into the transceiver. There are other transceivers around the base receiving the soldering alloy, and then that's being fed into all the circuit assemblers, keeping them full at all times with the soldering alloy. So you don't have to worry about putting an ingot in a fluid extractor here and there and filling up things. You can do it with AE crafting. If you have, say, a fluid extractor paired up with a circuit assembler, you could have the recipe say all the circuit parts plus 1 soldering alloy ingot, and then whitelist the ingot into a fluid extractor and do it that way, and you're using your ingots as you need to. That's probably a better way of doing it first off. we have absurd amounts of material at this point, so we're using this setup to just be able to keep things constantly fed. You know, and this fluid extractor is one of, there's about 5 others behind here feeding more different types of fluids. There's I can't remember all the different stuff that there is. I think one's doing lubricant, one's doing sulfuric acid. All these fluids are actually going through one channel with the transceiver, but on the other end where it's receiving it, you just use an Ender IO fluid conduit, and you can whitelist what fluid you want out of it and make sure that only that fluid goes in the machine. It's a nice way of reducing a lot of clutter, I guess you'd say, in a base, if you can do it. But of course, it takes some time to get to the point to be able to do stuff like this. But when you can, it's definitely nice. It definitely cuts down on all your conduits.
So now, are you guys using the EU to RF that the cables can do to run your transceivers, or are you using RF?
Yes, that transceiver is plugged into an HV line, which is actually being powered from. It's actually, the line comes from the buffer down here, and I just transform it down before it gets to that point. Yeah, any RF related machine we got, like these painting machines, any of this stuff is typically directly placed on just the Gregtech cable. It's not vibrant alloy cable or anything like that. Not an NRIO stuff behind it. It's usually, I think the painting machines are actually the NRIO conduit, but that's
some of these are conduit.
That's like the only stuff. Yeah.
There's not enough room to do the Gregtech behind it and still input and output of them.
And you will lose if you use Gregtech cable to transfer the EU across long distance. You're still going to lose that power when you ultimately plug in an RF based machine into it. So like, if you've got an LV line and you run it over, whatever, 20 blocks, and you're only left with 10 EU or whatever at the end of it. When you convert that to RF at that point, if you have a machine there, you're only going to be getting 40 RF a tick at that point of the line. So it's actually pretty smart about knowing what to make use of at the point of the line where you plug the machine in. So you still don't want to use a lot of Gregtech cable. The reason we use the Ender IO for here is because it is quite a long distance. So for those ones, we did use that in that case. But most of the transceivers are plugged directly in to the cable wherever they are.
I don't know if you want to show them the behind the computer area or not.
Yeah, why not? This is a little
holy
thing
crap.
you just walk through here. So this is a lot of the just mess type of stuff. These are things are where they are because it just needs to be there.
Also, a lot of this stuff is from early on and just kind of so intricate.
There's a hole in the floor.
Oh. It's a trap.
Okay.
I'll save you. Just move from that spot real quick.
I knew you guys were going to find a way to try to kill me while I was here.
There you go. That'll make you fly up. Artificial flight. There you go. Yep. So we got our NASA workbench hidden back here. We've got a couple of things hidden back here, I guess you'd say, but it's not necessarily meant to be hidden. It's just there's a lot of stuff you got to make in this pack, and we didn't have a place to put it all. So this is where the kind of leftover stuff, and yeah, early on things were made. A lot of this is still being used. So here's the different fluids. Actually, this is good to come back here. This is showing all the different fluids that we've got running into that transceiver I was just talking about that's sending fluid all over different places in the base. So there's a lubricant going into it. And actually, there's another case of transvector. What this transvector interface is linked to is that transceiver that was out there. So all these pipes that are pumping fluid into this are actually going into that transceiver that's sending the fluids out elsewhere. It's a way of getting more out there with not having access to it. And you can have the transvector block 4 blocks away from any block you link it to. But anyway, we got honey, and this one is actually being pumped into it. This one's got seed oil. This one's molten rubber. That's another one you need a lot of to do like your cables with your assembler. So the rubber is just automatically being fed into that one processing array we talked about the other time, and it's just automatically keeping full of the rubber. The AE system just keeps sending out the rubber sheets as needed.
That was a big thing early on, was setting up the forestry farm to do rubber trees and just constantly be getting sticky resin because there's so much glue and rubber requirements in this stuff.
Yes, that's a very good way of getting your rubber.
Ah, there's your dissipation charges.
Yes.
Yes, that's that. See, everything is somewhere.
And above you is 3 of the quantum rings carrying our ME system across.
Yeah,
the
I've seen those.
dimensions.
Those are nice. I
Yes.
bet
Also, quite the
so.
power drain.
One of one of them goes up top to the Thaumcraft, where you saw the one first starting off with the Thaumcraft room. The other one goes to the station in space, so that when I'm in space, I can have access to all of this while I'm there, which is very nice. And then the third one goes to where we're doing just a creative type build near the server spawn area, and that allows us access to our computer from 10,000 blocks away. It's very handy. So that way I can make and get all the blocks I need and different stuff, and if there's something missing, I can come back and put it in the computer, make it a recipe, that kind of stuff, and just be able to auto-craft any of the blocks I need to build with. So that's just that's a new side project I've taken one doing. So yeah, that's what that one's for.
It's nice to be able to see behind the walls that all the stuff that I leave out for everybody to see. You guys have hidden back here.
Yeah, see here's a case of where like any interface is hooked up to the multi-smelter. It's just 2 interfaces because there's more than 10 patterns, so you only get 10 patterns per, and that just feeds in the box. Box pulls with a conveyor into the input bus of the multi-smelter. Now here's one thing that kind of learned the hard way with the multi-smelter though. If you're going to just directly smelt, say, crushed ore, so like sometimes with, say, like crushed copper, you can get 10 nuggets with a crushed copper ore, right? If you do your 2 full stacks of crushed copper ore, you're going to end up getting more nuggets than the HV output bus can handle, and it's going to waste about 3 or 4 stacks of copper nuggets when you run that. So we use a 1 slot input bus to limit it to only 1 stack at a time for that kind of stuff. It makes something like 19 or 20 stacks of copper nuggets if you run copper ore 2 stacks full, and you will lose them because the output bus is only 16 slots. So it's kind of a bad thing that can happen if you have your multi-smelter fully upgraded. And as far as I'm aware, there's no way to really avoid that, because I don't even know. I don't know if you could have 2 output buses and it would like split it up. I'm thinking it wouldn't. I've never tried that, but yeah, you would lose quite a bit. That's really the only case of a recipe. I mean, dust is ingot, that's 1-to-1, but you're doing, crushed to nuggets, and you're turning 64 things into 640 things. So it's going to be.
I've never tried it,
stacks.
But I do know on the distillation tower, if your output bus gets full of the hydrated coal, that it'll start filling the input of your output hatches with hydrated coal. So I'm guessing if you put 2 output hatches on it, or 2 output buses on it, it would go to the second one.
Yeah, maybe it would then, and then we could avoid that problem. Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. I guess I assumed it wouldn't, so I didn't even try, but we weren't doing it a whole lot. But the first time I ran, I'm like, it seems like we're not getting as much out of that as we should be, and it was definitely wasting it. Without a place to go, it is going to waste it. I mean, that's just how they work. If you don't have a place for it to go, it's going to waste the materials that it's outputting. So maybe they added that as a failsafe to throw it in any kind of place it possibly could to hopefully save it. Because I never had experienced that before.
Yeah, because we actually use, just like Econ does, we have the 2 distillation towers and cracking machine, and use the second one for the heavy fuel down to the other things. And if you don't empty your output bus, you will definitely find in your output hatches in the input slot the tiny hydrated coal.
Do you want to show them the old reactors real quick, maybe?
The nukes. The nuclear reactors. Yeah, we could do that real quick. That's just down here. This was pretty early on stuff too. Once we got into where we could make the nuclear reactor, we made this little. This just goes down twice. So it goes down once just into a small little.
Okay.
You go down twice here, and you can actually walk across here. There is another travel anchor, but you don't need to use it. So we had 4 nuclear reactors running. This is the setup that we had inside of them. It would take 12. We use what was it? Quad rods?
Quad rods.
Yes. 4 quad uranium, or 12 quad uranium rods in each one. So we were running, 48 of them, I guess. Was it quads though? I think it was only duals. I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was quads.
Yeah. I forget the exact setup. We haven't used these in a while. It's literally probably been 3 or 4 weeks.
This was just to get the initial plutonium to do everything.
Right.
Else ever since
The first fusion reactor requires a 241 plate for the recipe, and you got to have that 241 ingot. And this is how we got it: was making the plutonium from the depleted uranium cells.
Yeah, you got like 3 ways to do it. You got the crop. You got thermal centrifuging the depleted rods, which is probably the second best if you're unless you're lucky and get the crop. And the worst is, of course, just keep centrifuging the uranium, and then get plutonium from that, and centrifuge that again, and hope you get the other plutonium.
Which to me is just very wasteful to centrifuge your uranium when you could be putting it in a reactor and getting power out of it.
This is probably the most feasible way of doing it. Like I said, unless you get lucky and get the crop.
See, well, the funny thing is, we didn't even use these for their power output. These things were just running. They weren't even hooked up. We weren't even making use of the power. It was just that actually was just being completely wasted. We didn't have a real need at the time. When we were running these, we were using nitro diesel, the 1 HV. And while these were putting out close to that, I decided I wanted to keep it down here safe, and you can tell it's inside the reinforced stone. I didn't want to take any chances. It's a safe setup, but
that's exactly what XAR is doing. He's at the point where he's trying to get to a fusion reactor, and when he first set it up, he was not keeping any of his power either. And I was like, dude, you realize you're voiding more power right now than what I have in my entire base? Because we had 2.
Oh, definitely.
We had 2 nukes set up with 366 EU output on each one to get him. We were running thorium and quad rods in it at the same time, so he could try to get the lutetium, I think it's called, that you need for americium.
Yeah, lutetium or something like that.
Yes, the
that was the thing we used them for after we got the plutonium, was to start running thorium to thermal.
And we were running them both at the same time, just because you can throw extra thorium in with the uranium and not really cause that much extra heat. And I set that reactor up for him because he's not set very many reactors up, and I may not be the best at it, but I know what I'm doing enough to not blow everything up. And I was like, dude, if you're going to waste this much power, send that shit to me. You probably shouldn't have grabbed that.
Might want to not put those in there, by the way.
Yeah, I was thinking when you said that was quads, I was like, man, that does not look like that would handle quads.
Yeah, it's not enough. Yep, it's dual. So there it's doing 720, and that was just kind of sitting there.
Times 4. Yeah, like for a very long time, just being wasted, all that power.
Probably ran these for like 2 weeks
here.
Yeah. But at the time, it wasn't necessary. We were pretty solid with our nitro diesel setup and everything, so it's really the only use we got out of these was just specifically for doing this to try to get the plutonium for the 241, and then of course later on to get the
Now, for your nitro diesel, I should have asked this last time. How are you guys getting your nitrogen?
Nitrogen. That was, I still got that sort of set up somewhere.
Because GT Plus has a way you can get nitrogen straight from a distillery, but if you don't have GT Plus, it can be a bit of a pain.
Right.
Yeah.
The nitrogen is, I'm doing the, let's see here.
Okay, you guys have the way I'm doing it with air.
So it's the air, yes, and then it takes the oxygen cell. I've turned this off since because, yeah, I can turn it back on. I've turned it off because the tanks were actually getting quite full. So basically this was doing it. Well, ultimately this is using the nitrogen even to make the nitrogen dioxide too. So, but basically you got your fluid canner with your compressed air cells making the air. So you have a compressor up top. There's the compressor. That's making the compressed air cells simply just from empty cells. That's all there is to that. That runs down into the fluid canner, which empties the compressed air cells to make the air. And then you put your air into your thermal centrifuge with an empty cell, and that makes your nitrogen.
Mm-hmm.
It also makes oxygen too, I think, in the cell. So you get your oxygen that way too. It's, I guess, considered the most efficient way of getting the nitrogen. I think it takes a little less power than the other method. I used to do the other method,
way
which
is
I
the
can't
vacuum
remember
freezer.
exactly what it is. I think it's the distillery, the air. Oh yeah, well yeah, that's even, yeah, that's,
yeah, we're trying to set that up right now.
But I think there's even, I guess, a third way. Then there's something where you can do, I think you can just simply, you can just simply distill the air to get it. So you have a distiller with a configuration 1 with the air in it, and it can just make nitrogen out of air. It takes 50 air to make 30 on nitrogen. While that's just one machine, that takes, I think, more power than this, and it's also a bit slower. And so the quest book actually explains it pretty well, of the two methods. It says you can do this one or the other one, and it says which one's better in a sense. So I went with it this way this time around. I'd never done it this way before. I thought, no, give it a try, and I liked it. I thought it was a lot better. So these run, and again, back to our tanks over here, that's being sent over to these different tanks. So like nitrogen, the top left one's nitrogen. So yeah, see, we got some nitrogen. And
yeah, you got plenty of nitrogen. Yeah. Holy crap.
And then the nitrogen dioxide, that's being made too. What happened was these got full, and then these machines backed up, which wasn't a problem. They would have turned off on their own and just stopped and not doing anything. But I decided I just turned them off for the time being, just to have less things running in general. Because some stuff we do does use these other products. The nitrogen dioxide is used a lot with certain recipes. The epoxy plates use that pretty heavy. So yeah, that's okay. How we did the nitrogen. So let's see. Let's move on down another level. A couple more things we got. This is some of our barrels, basically our storage area, if you will. ME drives inside there, put the barrels there. We were going to make a lot more use of barrels. We had all these outer walls set up to be filled with stuff. And then we just started making more and more ME storage cells. Most of those are 64K storage cells. And we were able to just store most of what we had in there anyways, and we stopped using the barrels. We kept what we had in them, but most of it's
so you have
a system at this point.
You have storage
starting off,
upgrade or whatever they're called. Yeah.
Yes. Storage buses behind each barrel. Yes, okay. The AE system sees all of this stuff. And I mean, when you're starting off with your AE system, it's a good idea to use barrels for things you have a lot of. because you can really max out your smaller cells fast with a lot of your stuff. So I mean, if you've got hundreds or even thousands of a single item, it's going to be better to put it in a barrel. It's going to save you a lot of your storage space in your cells, because you're not going to be able to make a bunch of 64K drives, starting off. You're going to have to start small and work your way up. So that's why we had these barrels. We had, at the point when we made it, thousands of certains of things. We always have lots of cobblestones, and we didn't really want to get rid of it. So we made a barrel for that, stored that. That was definitely one of the first things that a barrel was used for. So yeah, it's handy to integrate them in with your system for sure. What these are here, opposite these four setups, are the molecular assemblers, the AE2 molecular assemblers. There's 2 of those in each one of these, but they have take that back. There's 8 in each of these, 8 molecular assemblers in each of these setups, with 32 ME interfaces hooked up to each one. So there's 4. I can't math at the moment, but there's 32 on each one. Yes. There's actually,
for a total of 32 interfaces and 8 assemblers.
Yes, exactly. So what that allows for is 128 times 10 recipes. So that's 1,280 recipes we could have in for just regular, normal stuff you could craft in a crafting bench type recipes. That's what these are for. And we actually have more than half of these filled at the moment. So we have over 700-ish recipes in the AE system of stuff you would just normally handcraft. So it's nice. That's while we were just standing down there at the nuclear reactors, I made it craft 12 of the uranium cells to put in it just to test. So I did that while we were just waiting there.
How many of these controllers do you actually have to have for this size AE setup? The controller thing?
All the controllers in there are not actually controllers.
Oh.
Those are Futura blocks. They're just there for look.
Yes. As far as inside these are all visual, but what we've got is 2 rings of 8. So we've got 16 controllers, but they're not all quite hooked up. That is somewhere here. Here we go. You can look up in here and see these are the real controllers that are up in there. So it's just a square, 8 ring of them, and then there's 2 layers of it, and that's it. And you can see there's cables hooked up to most, but not all of them. I don't really know how many channels we've got going on right now. It's definitely over 256. It's probably somewhere around 500 channels, I'd guess, maybe a little bit more. It's a lot of stuff happening for sure. So, all right, a little fun thing here real quick. We're going to store you.
Now, Junior tried storing me once and it killed me.
And get lost in my own base.
Okay.
This won't kill you. Pyro will go with you.
Yeah, it'll be safe. I'll come with you.
Okay.
Our storage is 100% safe. So, kind of integrated it into the base to make it look like it's not much. And then you hit the button and off you go.
Or not.
Or not.
Remember, you switch the button to the one type.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes, it's actually a lever. It's not a real button anymore. It's
so
different kind of switch.
This is kind of more than just like for the hell of it and to just do it. This is actually has a functional use. I come in here since I usually mostly do the combat stuff, and I would spawn withers in here to farm them, because in this pack hardcore wither is on, and as the more times you kill him, the more difficult he gets and the more abilities he gets. Eventually it gets to the point, if you say decide to spawn him in the nether, for example, he'll constantly teleport on you. Like you try to swing at him, he'll be teleport away instantly, and he just constantly does it. It becomes a real pain to kill him. The trade-off, of course, with hardcore wither mode is it makes the wither drop more nether stars. He becomes affected by fortune, so it's a decent trade-off. There is a kind of, I'm not sure if it's a bug or intentional, but if you kill the wither enough times on hardcore mode, he resets to normal wither stats and abilities, but still gets the benefit of hardcore wither. It's a strange thing. But when he's in here, he can't warp around because there's no place for him to technically warp because it's a solid block essentially.
So these like this black area is actually a wall.
Yeah, you can't.
Oh,
you can't walk
okay.
off into it. It's just nothing.
How tall
This
is
the
it?
limit of this dimension.
Oh,
It's
okay.
16 by 16 by 16, I think.
Roughly. Yeah.
Or 15 by 15 by 15, one of the two. But yeah, and this is treated as some of the other dimensions. The Gru can't spawn in here, even though the message pops up.
And this is witherproof.
But yeah, that's about it for this. Yep, he can't blow it. I mean, I could have no floor. You can't fall through the world. It's just kind of there for point of reference. Also, you can't place blocks on this black stuff, so it's a point for me to build the wither out of. So yeah, that's about it for the spatial drive. It's very handy. It's expensive to do, though. Of course, it's a lot of titanium.
And it takes a good bit of power to power it. Like we can't flip this switch and then flip it again. It takes a little while for it to recharge. It's taking, I think, 4 million RF each time, or something like that. Yeah. It goes up with the size of the room. I mean, and you can make it bigger than this, but the idea was to keep it small to keep the wither contained. So we had done that before. This time, finally, actually made it look a little nicer and integrated in with the look base.
Yeah, it looks kind of cool.
All right. Over to the left or right. I'm going the other way. This is some pneumatic craft stuff. We did do pneumatic craft. It has some use, definitely. Not a lot, but some specific use. But that's pretty much basic pneumatic craft stuff. Nothing too fancy going on there. Got a lot of the pipes and stuff kind of hidden to clean it up looking and all. You know, there's a little bit of behind the scenes stuff, but not much. We do at this point, we use the RF, the flux or whatever it's called, the electric, the flux generator to create the compressed air for it. So you can't start off with that, of course. We use just the coal generators starting off, but now that we've got the better machines, you work your way up through pneumatic craft, you can make better ways of making the air. So anyway, over here, got some real high-tech gadgets here.
Oh yeah, big stuff for magic. They're actually automated string making for Thaumcraft.
Yes, these are actually hooked up to the AE system, and as you can probably guess, you don't see anything happening, but it's up here, transvector interface. They're linked to each one, and then all the ME stuff is rigged into those. Actually, before that, it makes use of a Gregtech regulator, which is telling it the pattern to put in there. So these things are very particular in the recipes. So like, for instance, with this one, it needs 4 string, but the string has to be individually in each 4 slots. So you use the Gregtech regulator to force the string it has into each one of those 4 slots, and that will make the recipe. So each one of these has a regulator hooked up to them that kind of tells it where to put what in the machine. It's actually very handy to do it that way. I think that's probably the only way you could force that thing to have that recipe and have it work right. Because if you just throw 4 string into it regularly, it's going to put it all in the first slot, and you're not going to get what it's supposed to make. So over here, some more bees. Yep. These are mostly the oil bees.
Yeah, mostly oils down here. This is another set of 128 bees. This brings the hive total to 256. There was planned for this empty space here to have more apiaries if we need them, but they accrued pretty fast that we didn't need that many.
Okay.
Not much else back here. These are just the processing arrays that are making the scrap for
I lost you.
The replicators up top. Oh, you're good. Just these here are the processing arrays making the scrap for the replicators up top. They're directly up above them. pretty close setup. Each one's directly up above it. Pretty much each of those setups is contained within that 5x5 area. And again, they have the red lights on them in case there's maintenance. And here's a case of one. This one needs maintenance. These ones almost always need maintenance because, I mean, these are just constantly running, making the stuff. So this one here, we got screws missing. So fix that real quick while we're here. And should go off.
Circuitry.
Oh, we got more problems. Fix that real quick too. I don't really come down here too often, so better fix it.
That is a lot of work to make scrap right there. And as we discussed between, I'm not going to tell you what they're using to make their scrap. It's proprietary. I can't even tell you because they didn't tell me.
Secret.
Yes. We can't tell all of our secrets. They are MV recyclers in each one too, and the reason that is normally I would use LV recyclers, but these are feeding. One of these setups is actually feeding 2 replicator setups, and just the way I broke it down, it needed to be MV recyclers making the scrap, not LVs. LVs would not be able to keep up with 2 of the replicator setups that are up top above each one. So that was an important change I had to make to previous setups. I've done things similar, and you typically try to use the lowest machine you can get away with, but LV was not cutting it, so it had to be MV recyclers for that particular way of going about it. So, so that's this floor.
I don't know if you want to point out the
crafting. This is just the crafters for the AE system. There are 7 of those. You see 5, there's 2 more behind them, kind of hidden. They're what you need to be able to do the auto crafting with the AE2. So each one can make something. So with this current setup, we can have 7 different recipes being worked on with the AE system. So, and just a little fancy way of showing it. But they are all functional. I mean, the pink ones are co-processors, and then the colored ones are based on the size of the storage amount of the crafting unit. So, all right, down one more level.
Getting to the end here.
We're getting to the big stuff. Big stuff here now. This is just a spawner room, typical whatever spawner we need in there. We make them go. The glass prevents mobs from coming out. It's just the extra utilities, ineffable glass. So we can come in, mobs can't come out. It's handy. Not sure if you're familiar with the corporeal attractor, but that pulls mobs to it like a magnet. So anything that spawns gets pulled right to that, and it sits right in front of the Killer Joe, which takes them out. Ender Collector collects the loot, and it works pretty well. The attractor does have to be powered by redstone. That's why there's the redstone block there.
The attractor pulls equal distance to half the redstone signal going into it. So the best it can pull from is 7.5 blocks away.
Okay.
Full strength redstone going into it.
So here, if there's any Stargate fans out there, they might think this looks familiar.
It's also probably something you won't see too often.
Yeah, I've never seen one. We're gonna go.
So we're gonna go through this. This is the Stargate, and it does work.
And you don't want to stand near it when it's activating. It will kill you.
Yeah, the hazard line there is a little bit beyond the range, but it's a safe place to be. So the way it works, have you ever looked at one of these?
No, I haven't.
Devices before? You could come up here real quick and take a look. Just so you right click on the top of it, and it actually has 2 places to click, but the top is the control for it, and the interface is pretty unique. Each of those buttons at the bottom, you can actually click on those, and they actually dial in different symbols for the address. Each of those little buttons is actually a button. It's pretty well done. It's a very nice thing. So we have 2 Stargates. We have the one here, and then we have one in space in the asteroids dimension. And you have to know the address of the Stargate you're dialing to. And the way you get that is by right-clicking on the Stargate once you form it.
Yeah.
We'll just leave ours alone
Yeah.
for now. We'll keep our address a secret. Because if somebody else built a Stargate, their address, they could come in and, you know, we're trying to
They
beat
could always
them,
put
so.
an iris in and they could
Yes.
die on their way in.
There are upgrades that can be added to this thing. You can put in an iris upgrade, which basically closes it. And if you have it closed and someone tries to come through, it kills them. And it, like, I think takes out all their items and stuff too. I don't know what it does with them, but it definitely takes them out. So yeah, there are defense mechanisms, and I don't think you have any way of knowing that the iris is closed on the other end. If you go through it, you just come through and you're done. But we don't have that installed. We don't really have to worry about that for now. So anyways, all you do is dial the address, and it is nice. It's all letters and numbers. You can just type the address in, and I have a little file on the side that I have the address, and you type it in, and it goes, and it actually animates and makes noise.
Very fancy. Also, you can hook it up to Open Computers or Computer Craft, whatever mod you run, and dial in with that instead. You can control many functions in Stargate.
I will go through first just to make sure, because I have my space gear on. I just want to make sure it's actually sealed. It should be fine, but if it's not and you come through, you're going to have a hard time. So let's not get you killed. Let me double check it.
It's fine. I would have
It
died
looks
by now.
fine.
Okay.
Oh, well, Power was willing to risk it, so you're good. So now you are in the asteroids dimension of Galacticraft. This is actually the final dimension with this version of Galacticraft. This is as far as you can get. And just like that, you're here. Wasn't quite that simple for us, but you know, we had to build all the rockets and go through the stages of the moon and the Mars and beat the bosses to get here. But now that we're here, you can build Stargate and go back and forth that way. You can see outside. I just tonight put in some windows so you could look out and actually see what it looks like out there.
Oh yeah,
that one probably being a little bit more interesting. But yeah, they're just
of course,
floating
this
around.
is where all the fancy mining happens.
In this, yes. So this is very much like the end, where it has the asteroids in the end floating around. It's pretty much the same idea here. It's just that they're red asteroids. They're the red granite, and that's all. I mean, they are bigger too. They're a lot bigger in size, and they don't follow, being their asteroids, they don't follow the same typical rules as like a vein. So like a diamond asteroid, for example, will have the diamond blocks, the ore blocks all over it and all layers of it. It won't just be like the center two, like a typical vein would be in the overworld. So they follow different rules. Like the asteroid's full of everything. So you can get a lot more out of an asteroid here than you would in like a typical vein in the overworld or in the Nether or wherever else.
And it has the added benefit of being much easier to locate veins.
And there's actually things floating out there
around like this. They just there are.
Those don't have collision. Those are just mostly
visual. You can hit them and destroy them, but there's nothing. You don't get anything out of them, and they'll just go right through you if they come at you. But yes, it's pretty cool. It is definitely a neat place. I mean, I was here for weeks doing mining, so
it's pretty cool. I've never been this far in Galacticraft, and on Thylacraft we actually have galaxy space, so we have other planets and things we can go to. There's actually one planet that's like all iridium ore on it.
Right. Yeah, it would have been nice, and I know it probably was a thought of the pack, but to somehow integrate the planets better and make, kind of force you to get this type of ore from the moon per se, and then to get this, you get Desh from the Mars, and of course the moon is, I guess its ore would be meteoric iron because you need that for the rocket, but to potentially integrate it better with the pack, say, like you were saying, have iridium someplace only, or uranium someplace only, something like that, on one of the planets. And Naquata is only here. So that is the reward for being here, is to be able to find Naquata. Now, even though it is here, it isn't very common. I mean, I've covered quite the distance here looking for it, and it is very rare, but it is here. It does exist. But I've spent hours going around in here looking for it before. You know, not trying to overdo exploration, but it's unfortunately required to find this stuff because it's really spread out.
Yeah.
And I try to just go like in a circle and kind of like a spiral and just work my way out in a circle pattern and reveal and try not to go off on like long straight distance excursions, you know, because try to reveal the map as nice as possible to find what I can. I mean, that way you also hope we don't miss much, but pretty much every ore is here as well, except for a couple of things that you only would find in the nether. Like the spherolite, the zinc equivalent node, that's not here. There's no salt here, but pretty much everything else is here. There's emerald, there's diamond, there's obviously naquata, there's platinum, there's copper,
Titanium.
That is another thing, titanium. Okay, so with Galactic Craft, it has its own titanium ore block. It's actually not called titanium ore, it's actually the ilmenite ore, which is Gregtech as well. But these asteroids, say like out this window, these gray asteroids, those are the Galactic Craft generated asteroids. Inside those can have I think 4 different Galactic Craft ores. They can be iron, it can be aluminum, ilmenite, and then actually meteoric iron blocks, which you just take that block and cut it and you get meteoric iron plates out of it, which is just crazy because you just get a lot of it that way. It's once you get here, you really don't have to worry about meteoric iron anymore. But the ilmenite ore, when you just use a regular pickaxe on that, it splits into titanium shards, and that's where the titanium shards come from. You've probably noticed those before and wondered where they come from. Those are your easy way of making titanium, because all you have to do with that shard is put it in a thermal centrifuge and it gives you a titanium dust, and that's it. You just blast furnace your titanium dust and you have titanium. No rutile dust plus chlorine, tetrachlorine stuff to do it that way. But unfortunately, you got to do it that way first to get here because the rocket requires titanium. So, but once you get here, titanium becomes a bit easier as long as you can find it. It's not in every one of these asteroids, but it's there, and it is a nice way of getting your titanium.
Okay,
once
that's
you
cool.
Get here, for sure. Yeah. So we will get out of here as soon as this decides to shut down. Actually, it takes 5 minutes for this to close, and I can't turn it off.
Still set it to go back to base?
That will go to the miner that I've got out here.
So I was gonna say we just throw the dragon egg on that and teleport back.
Put a dragon egg on it and teleport back?
Okay.
Well,
so
yeah, you want to explain it?
That is another way of getting here. This is one of the Gregtech teleporters. Maybe you have or haven't used them before. Don't hit that button because it will kill you. This right now will send me, or whoever hits it, it would send all of us, actually. Anybody that's
3x3 in front of it.
Right now it's set up to go to where I have one of the miners placed, and that's where I have it here. So what this sucker can do, it will teleport you to any coordinate you put into there. Just, it puts you there. It has a limit of about 100,000 blocks. It's got a ridiculous range. So you could travel like 100,000 blocks in one direction with this thing, and you don't have to be there first. The area that you're going through does have to be loaded. So, but what you can do with the dragon egg on it is go between dimensions. By default, it does not do between dimension travel. But with the dragon egg, you can go between dimensions. So what he was saying was we could plop a dragon egg down, hit the button to go back to base, and then we leave the dragon egg behind. It doesn't consume the dragon egg or anything. It just sort of simply looks for it to be nearby to unlock the dimension category on the coordinates. Because normally if there's 4 buttons, the 4th button does nothing without the dragon egg. But with the dragon egg, you can specify a dimension number, and that's how you could use it. So we could use these to come back and forth between here too, and obviously be much quicker just to hit a button and go. But it's kind of cooler to use the Stargate, so that's why we do that. And we'll go
at least for space. Kind of fits the thing.
Yeah, for space, it's cool for the space stuff. You know, we'd have a Stargate set up on the moon, one set up on Mars. We don't, but we could. I mean, you know, if we wanted to set up a base on each one, it definitely would be a neat thing to do.
The biggest biggest downside to the Stargates is how long it takes them to charge, and of course it's only one-way travel, and then you have to wait for the gate to close.
Right.
I'm not sure if you can force close it or not, and then you have to dial back to go back the other way.
Yeah, you can force close it, but only from the dialing side. So, like you said, they're one way. That's why we couldn't just go right back through it. Nothing would have happened. It's only a one-way travel, and I think that's kind of how it was in the show. I think that's true to where the show worked.
I guess our thing to mention maybe is by default, Stargates don't allow interdimensional travel either. It needs the Chevron upgrade to allow interdimensional travel. But
Okay.
at this point, there's only one thing left to show off.
Yes.
The main reason everybody
Big stuff.
wanted me here.
Right. It's like, oh, we don't care about all this other stuff. Just show
Yeah.
us it.
This is all filler, just gets the good stuff.
Alright, the final door. So this is the fusion reactor room.
My
This
hair
is where I
gonna
was
stand
telling
on
you
end
to
when I
watch
come in
your step.
here. Wow, this is a heck of a room.
Yep. It's obviously not needed to be done like this, but we wanted to give it a nice fancy look for the fusion reactors. They're all, well, there are 4 of them, and they're all inside this column that's in the center. And the rings are kind of representative of each fusion
So
reactor.
you
I
have
should say.
4 of them stacked on top of each other, basically. Huh.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a kind of
Very
nice
compact.
way of doing it. And also, they are all inside one chunk, because that's kind of important for them to make sure they function. I mean, you can kind of stretch it and go a little off the edge of a chunk with a couple blocks, but you really don't want to split them up too much, because they really make use of all their different input areas. They're pretty particular about how they want to run. So where this is, and I mean, got pretty lucky with this setup that this happened to be inside of one chunk where these are exactly. And then I kind of built that first and then worked on the room from the outside of it. So yes, they're just all layered on top of each other. You can either use the anchor or there are ladders as well to go down. So mentioned it earlier about Neutronium, you know, taking 2 hours, 24 minutes just to make one ingot of it. And when you're needing 52 of them to make an ultimate battery, that's a lot of hours. That's days of running one fusion reactor. That's like, I don't know the math, but probably a week's worth of running a fusion reactor just to make one ultimate battery if you were to try to make it. And that's running at 96,000 EU a tick. That's the requirement of power for Neutronium, is 96,000 EU a tick. So decided that didn't want to take that long, could make another fusion reactor within a couple days at the point we were at. So we decided to make more fusion reactors to speed the process up. And also what this allows is to where you could have Neutronium constantly being run for those days and then have access to other fusion reactors to make other types of whatever you need out of them. So the first 2 are set up to do Neutronium. The third one down here is making the Quadria. To make the Quadria, you use the radon. It's where the radon comes into play, along with molten enriched Nequata. It has to be the enriched Nequata kind, and that makes your Nequadria. So obviously you have to have Nequata, but also the enriched version to be able to make the Nequadria. The Nequadria then gets fed into the 2 upper fusion reactors. We'll go back up, just go back up 1. And I'll put this drum on here, and these will actually go, or should go right now. There, boom. So they started up, and they are making Neutronium right now at a very slow rate, obviously. And it takes 600, what was it, 600 million EU for it to start. And then, of course, the 96,000 EU a tick to run. So right now we're actually running, 192,000 EU a tick roughly, just to make 2 fusion reactors run. Just to get 2 Neutronium ingots in 2 hours
right.
and 24 minutes.
So the first question I was asked was
So
why
this
in the
has
hell
to
you
run a
need
while.
4?
Okay. Well, yeah, that's just so that
Okay.
can run more to get Neutronium faster. If you want to get it
Otherwise,
faster,
you'll
if you're
have to go-
cool. I mean, if you're cool with it taking a week or 2 to make anything with it. I mean, not everything takes that much. If you want to make tools, a saw takes 2 plates, so that's 4 hours, almost 5 hours to get one, enough to do that. But the ultimate battery takes 52 ingots. Also, the turbine blade didn't quite show that, but the turbine blade we have on that plasma turbine up there is a Neutronium turbine blade. That takes 75 Neutronium ingots to make that one. That was the third tier of the turbine blades. Yeah, it's not the biggest one, but it's the next to biggest. The biggest one would take 100 Neutronium ingots to make. And we did some testing. It didn't seem like it was really worth it to take the extra time to make the biggest one, so we just decided to go with the next to biggest one, and that takes 75 ingots. That would take I think easily 14 days or something if you only have one fusion reactor to make all of that.
The biggest deal about the turbine and making on Neutronium is, of course, we pretty much never had to worry about it breaking. It just goes forever, and even if it was close to breaking, you can put it in the disassembler and then put it back together again, and it's full durability again. So
yeah,
best use of material probably. The next best, of course, is
tritanium, but the power output is so much less. A tritanium rotor of the equivalent would do about, I don't even know, it's probably 200 to 300,000 EU a tick, where the Neutronium one is doing 500,000 EU a tick. It's just faster. In the end, it's going to be the same out of your fluid, out of your plasma, but it's just going to take longer to use it up with the lower blade. We're just trying to fill the ultimate battery, as fast as we can. I mean, even though it's never going to fill, but just trying to get the best out of it. So, but yeah, I mean, because then so those are running that. You go down to the bottom, the very bottom fusion reactor is making the iron plasma. This runs 24/7. So if we wanted to make, if you only had one fusion reactor and you wanted to make iron plasma, well, we wouldn't be able to make Neutronium at the same time. We have to stop, and it's kind of like what we did with the assembly lines. I mean, we basically made a fusion reactor for whatever we wanted to be making all the time. So this one makes the iron plasma all the time. It's transceiver fed the required fluids to make the iron plasma, and it transceivers it out and goes up to the turbine. And it's always running. We've got a mass supply of it takes silicon and magnesium to make iron plasma, and we've just got that fed into fluid extractors. It's just constantly fed. So this always runs, and we never have to stop it. And so that's just one fusion reactor right there used up. And, that's...
So, if you wanted to constantly make Neutronium, then you need one fusion reactor constantly making the quadria to do that fusion, and then you could have one fusion, like this one here, the third one, constantly running to make the power to power the other.
And that was the second question I had was, what in the hell do you guys do with this much power? Which is fill that ultimate battery.
Do nothing with it, essentially.
The idea was to use the ultimate battery to power the entire base, because if we ran enough wire everywhere, it could be done, but it's not really something we need to do. We've got a lot of Naquata,
of course,
to run. We've probably got enough
tier power. You could run so much cable and not really end up losing too much power going that far distance,
right?
And then convert it to whatever power you need at the end destination. So, but at this point, it's a joke for power anyway. It's just kind of to do it thing.
Yeah, we have enough enriched Naquata to probably do stuff like this for months. I mean, easily, without worrying about it. I mean, when you get the enriched Naquata from those asteroids in space like that with the miner, you're multiplying the amount you're getting with the miner alone, but then combined with the bees, you're quadrupling it. And then even when you're quadrupling it, the bee also makes an actual ingot's worth of the fluid enriched Naquata, which is the fuel for these. So you're automatically getting an ingot of fuel right there, but then you're also getting 4 of the dust, which then you can further process with thermal centrifuge to get a tiny dust, and then pulverize to get a 10% chance at another dust. It's just, you get so much by doing it that way. You're basically getting as much out of it as you possibly can. And that's why we have so much of this.
And with how rare Naquata is and how small they
Now,
can be,
if you didn't
want to get as
have
much out of it as you can
Galacticraft,
anyway.
you really wouldn't be able to run your base off of Naquata.
Well,
No.
yeah, because it'd be
Yes.
impossible.
If it was just Gregtech alone without Galacticraft, this would not be possible this way. You'd have to do it a lot differently. So yes,
Okay.
our
Because I
setup is
know
very
with
specific
just
to this
Gregtech,
pack.
Naquata only is
The only way-
in the end, and there's only a chance you're going to get it on the main island. And I don't even know how the asteroids work there for Naquata.
Right.
Yes. So in this pack, in the end, I believe the book says it's still possible to get Naquata in the end, but in the amount of time we've played, the three various times we've played this pack, and the amount of times we've explored the end, we've never come across an actual Naquata node. The best you can find in the end is small Naquata, and you're not going to get much done with that.
Because you can do the similar, like uranium to get plutonium centrifuge way with it, and sacrifice your regular Naquata dust to try to get enriched Naquata tinies with like a 20% chance or less. And yeah, you're not going to get a whole lot done that way. That's not the best use of it.
Of course, yeah, that's pretty much the only other way you can really do it without a node of it is fusion reactor it, and that's really rough.
Yeah, I mean, you could fusion reactor Naquata, and then it'll give you the fluid, and then you could get that, and then macerate it to get the dust, and then throw your dust at a centrifuge with a 20% chance to get it tiny enriched. I mean, when this stuff's running, I mean, we're going through some enriched Naquata pretty often. It's probably using 3-4 ingots a minute probably while these are running. But we've got, at this point, like over 50,000 ingots of enriched Naquata and more to come. So,
Of course, there is actually one other thing you can do for Naquata, but it's also about equally as rough as you can take the Naquata. Well, yeah, you can build up enough Naquata through other means to get the block to make your Naquata bee. Then you can take the Naquata combs, run it through an autoclave with UU matter, and produce a purified Naquata ore. But that takes, I think, a considerable amount of power, time, and UU matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd take about 5 or so minutes and almost 5 million EU just to get one purified uranium Naquata out of that way. Yeah, so it's pretty rough. Is there any other questions about the fusion reactor?
I think that was it. I'm trying to think. Because the other question was how you were powering them for startup.
They are all powered the same way. Naquata reactors on the outside, kind of hidden, but there are 3 Naquata reactors on each one. And that's because, well, there's actually a 4th that's shared between the 4 of them, but that's because to do Neutronium, you need 96,000 EU a tick. Each Naquata reactor is a third of that. So by having 3 Naquata reactors on it, that keeps it even. And then we have a 4th that's split between the 4 of them just to add that little extra so they'll gain.
Yeah, because you don't want the fusion to fail because it takes so much power to get started. If it fails, it has to build it all up again and start. So it's better to keep them running than it is to stop.
Yeah, that was about the questions I was asked before I came here. So
most fusion recipes, and you can actually, if you right click on the fusion controller block, there is the NEI little button upper right. You can see the recipes. Most of them don't take that much. Some of them take IV or less to do the fusions. In fact, the iron plasma fusion only requires IV input. It's only 8192 EU a tick, but it takes so much to start up. You have to have a tier 3 fusion reactor to be able to make it. So that's the trick to it, because the tier of fusion reactor allows you to have a bigger storage of the power is what it does. So like a tier 1 is, I think, only stores I don't know the exact number, but it's like half of a tier 3. So these recipes where it says 480 million EU, well, you can't do that with a tier 1. That's beyond tier 2. So you have to look at that number when you're looking at things. It's very important because you'll be like, oh, I'm trying to make this. Why is it not working? Well, you don't, or you aren't able to store up enough of the EU for it to run. So that's important to keep in mind too when you look at a recipe to run something.
Yeah, and of course you have to progress through all the different fusion reactors. You have to start with 1 to make a 2. You have to make a 2 to make a 3, and of course it's made more complicated in this pack because you have to do the whole same thing. You have to scan the fusion reactor to get the recipe for the next one.
Yep.
Not to mention the casings themselves are also
Yeah, them take like a lot of chrome, don't they?
material intense. Mark III takes chrome. Yes.
Yes.
A lot of chrome.
Part of the challenge is not just the controller block, it's the fusion coils that are on the insides of these fusion casings. The fusion coils take a lot of materials to make, but you don't have to make those until you want to go tier 2 or higher. The tier 1 reactor just uses LUV, superconductor coils rather, on the insides of it, and they're pretty intense to make, but not nearly as bad, because then the fusion coils take those as their part of the recipe, along with lots of other stuff. Takes about 8,000 graphite dust, about 8,000 tin, and like 2,000 or 3,000 steel, and then you need beryllium. There's a lot of materials involved in making a tier 2. And then, of course, the tier 2 to tier 3 upgrade is actually one of the simplest. All you do, the inside stays the same fusion coils. It's the outside that changes. You just change your fusion coils into the Mark II ones by adding the Americum plates. That's where the Americum comes into play. First thing you make with the fusion reactor usually is your europium, but that's only used to make 1 plate to make the tier 2. There's no other use for it beyond that. Europium is also used, though, to make the batteries, like the IV battery, actually the cluster rather, the LUV battery, and a couple other oddball things, but mostly it's just to try to upgrade to that next tier fusion reactor, just to get that 1 europium. But then Americum is much more used. That's a lot more. You need about 660 Americum to upgrade the fusion reactor from tier 2 to tier 3. And that's pretty much it for that part. The tier 2, tier 3, that's the big requirement. And then, of course, making the controller block, which is one of the worst recipes by far, one of the most complicated recipes besides the ultimate battery. The ultimate battery is so beyond like any recipe in the pack. It's just it's ridiculous the amount of stuff required. You could make like 10 fusion reactors with the materials it takes to make 1 ultimate battery. It's ridiculous.
And then you can think about that, and then the new lightning rods that Bloodass added.
Ouch.
The highest tier 1 takes 4 ultimate batteries to make.
Yeah. So we don't have the best.
Very limited use.
There's one thing we don't have. It would be the best lightning rod, but we can't seem to get that to work anyways. Plus, we stopped the rain, so it wouldn't have much use here. But
of course, with Endryo, you can force thunderstorms, so that could be probably a way to use power.
Let's go back up real quick. Let's go back out, and I'll show you one thing we do use the ultimate battery to power. And it's not even anything Gregtech, well, the Gregtech machine related, but not so much to power anything. So did you figure your way out? Just keep going up.
Down 1.
There you go. Up, back down 1.
Yep,
yeah, I think you
main underground.
I went too far.
Yeah. I think you went up all the way.
Yeah, 1 more down.
Oh, 1 down. Okay, gotcha.
The 1 down from the Thaumcraft room.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
you could take I guess also a real quick look over. Come over here. We'll look at the turbine blade that we've got in the turbine, the Neutronium. So you can look at some of the numbers on that thing, and it doesn't really make the best sense when you look at it, because it's like, well, what does that mean? And it's pretty vague. I know there's some math behind it. I don't fully understand it, but you can see that durability. This thing's been running for like a week now.
Oh yeah.
And you can see that durability hasn't gone very far. And so it's got a lot of ways to go. And even if it got low, like Pyro said, you could just disassemble it and reassemble it. It might take a while to disassemble this thing. We've never done it before, but yeah, you can disassemble a turbine as long as it's got damage done to it. And then you can just put it right back together again and keep it going. So, but that allows it with the iron plasma to make roughly 500,000 EU a tick. And it doesn't even say that kind of number on there, but that's what it does. So this buffer just feeds down this direction, and it's used to power these, which these are the Gregtech teleporters again. These only take LUV power, but we're making some use of the battery to keep these things full on power. And what we've done here is we've set up teleports just to various people's base on the server. And if you hit one of these buttons, it instantly puts you there, is what it'll do. It's a nice way of getting around for us. I mean, there's no way for those people to come back to us, but we can at least go there and help them with things. Sometimes people have questions about stuff, and we do our best to help them out on the server.
Now, how would you get back?
So it's nice to be able to get there quick and help them out. Okay.
That's
Pyro can explain that one.
So the Hardcore Ender expansion mod has these things called transference gems. They only work within the same dimension, but when you shift right click on the ground, they set a spot. And so then you can right click and it instantly puts you back at that spot. So it's kind of like a recall stone or hearthstone, I guess. They do have a power. It uses a fancy power that's specific to Hardcore Ender expansion, but it's not too difficult to make use of. The recipe for them is kind of annoying. It takes some fairly hard to get materials from the end.
Nice rocket.
It's not so bad.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, wow.
It is
very strong.
This is the tier 3 rocket. We did use it.
It's funny, you can still see the bracers that are supposed to be on his wrist back down where his arm should be.
All right, well, we've hit over 2 hours for your guys' base now, so I would like to give you the utmost thank you for the base tour. I know you guys are pretty secretive about where you are and what you do, but I really appreciate you guys letting us come in and take a look around and peek at all your stuff, or at least a little bit of your stuff. And
it's no problem. It's just a lot of effort, going into this. Is why we kind of keep it a little bit secretive. We know measures would be taken in case someone grieved, but it would be pretty painful to see something happen to this place.
And like I said for the last base tour, if you guys have any questions about their setups or anything like that, leave a comment. I will forward it to them. And if it's not something that they keep protected, I'm sure they'll be happy to answer it. They are also both in my Gregtech Help Discord channel if anybody'd like to pop in and ask them any questions. I'm sure they're not going to be in there all the time, but I can poke them a little bit for you if you need me to.
I'll probably mostly be in the Discord, so if anything, you can get a hold of me and I can bug Dar if it's something you'll know only.
Okay.
Ask Lon.
Like I said, thanks a lot for the time and the tour, and I will see you guys later. It's time for me to get to work. Bye.